On this Tuesday night, closing arguments at Donald Trump's historic hush money trial.
I did nothing wrong.
What lawyers told the jury and the message actor Robert de Niro had outside the courthouse for Trump supporters. Gaps in sharing intelligence about foreign interference, what an independent watchdog calls unacceptable. A warning to people in Papua New Guinea's disaster zone.
It's an extraordinarily complicated relief operation.
The next potential threat and what's interfering with aid efforts. And a $200,000 criminal mystery, the stolen cattle case that's left Quebec police with a lot of questions.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. The fate of former U.S. President Donald Trump could be in the hands of a New York jury by tomorrow. Lawyers for the defense and the prosecution made their final pitch to win over jurors today. 7 men and 5 women will decide whether to convict Trump on charges of falsifying business records, all tied to an alleged hush money scheme to suppress stories before the 2016 election. Jackson Proskow has our top story tonight.
Mr. Trump, how are you feeling about today?
In the final act of this 6-week saga, Donald Trump entered court defiant.
This is not the trial that should happen. It's a very sad day. This is a dark day in America.
In closing arguments, Trump's defense tried to pivot from salacious allegations about an adult film star, an affair, and hush money payments. This case is about documents. It's a paper case, Trump lawyer Todd Blanche told the jury, cautioning this isn't a referendum on your views on President Trump. Trump's team argued there's no evidence Trump knew how the payments were logged in business records and that the payments were reported to the tax department. The defense then tried to take down the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen, arguing the convicted liar lied repeatedly on the stand and is out for revenge and personal profit.
He was an essential witness for the prosecution because he's the only person and the only evidence the prosecutors have that really tie former President Trump to the falsification of the business records.
All told, Trump faces 34 felony counts related to the payments. Prosecutors say they were an illegal campaign contribution meant to keep a damaging story from surfacing right before the 2016 election. Trump has argued the checks were for legal services rendered by Cohen.
The question is, are the business records false? I think the prosecution has proven that. The question, though, is, were there in furtherance of or to cover up another crime? I'm not quite sure the prosecution has gotten there.
In their closing, prosecutors told the jury this is about a conspiracy and a cover-up to corrupt the 2016 election, arguing the case is about far more than an alleged affair. This scheme cooked up by these men at this time could very well be what got President Trump elected, said the prosecutor. After closing arguments will come instructions to the jury before they sit down for deliberations. That part could begin as early as tomorrow. As for how long that could take and whether or not it might be even possible for a jury to reach a verdict, those are the big unknowns here. FARA prosecutors we've been speaking with suggest 3 days at a minimum for deliberations, which would take us through till Friday.
As America holds its breath, Jackson. Now, it got quite political today. After months of ignoring or poking fun at the trial, U.S. President Joe Biden's campaign team sent some of its allies outside the courthouse. What happened there?
That's right. This is a real shift in strategy for the Biden campaign. They've really been ignoring Trump's legal troubles, but today they sent their campaign surrogates here to the courthouse, including actor Robert De Niro, who actually voices Biden's campaign ads, along with several of the officers who successfully defended the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th. All of this is meant to highlight the contrast between Biden and Trump, take advantage of the fact that most of the national media is here outside the courthouse. But Farah, what Biden might do if Trump is ultimately convicted is a big unknown here. They're really having a hard time navigating an opponent who is so bogged down in the courts.
Jackson Proskow in New York for us tonight. Thank you, Jackson. The United States' former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is facing backlash today after reportedly writing the words, "Finish them," on Israeli military missiles. Israeli politician Danny Danon posted a picture of Haley signing IDF artillery shells while in Israel. In the post, Danon says the former U.S. Republican contender included the words, "Finish them," in her signature. The Israeli politician has been accompanying Haley during her trip to Israel this week, where she stressed the U.S. should not be withholding weapons from Israel. To Gaza now. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 21 people were killed. Dozens of others were injured in a new attack on a tent camp near the city of Rafah. Smoke again billowed over Rafah today as reports suggest Israeli tanks have for the first time reached the heart of Gaza's southernmost city. Israel's military has denied conducting the latest strike, which hit near the site of Sunday's attack that killed at least 45 Palestinians and fueled international outrage.
April's tragic mistake was the bombing of aid workers providing food to starving Gazans. May's tragic mistake was the bombing of displaced children, parents and families who had fled to a designated safe zone in truly apoplectic scenes. What will June's tragic mistake be? And more importantly, what are we all in this world going to do to stop it?
Goomansingh reports on Israel's growing isolation on the day 3 European nations officially recognized a Palestinian state.
In Ramallah, a symbolic nod to a symbolic statement by 3 nations recognizing a Palestinian state.
We here in Ireland, we see you. We recognize you. We respect you.
Ireland, Norway and Spain now recognize the state of Palestine based on borders established before the 1967 war. A diplomatic push the leaders say will hopefully advance both peace talks and the return of hostages.
The recognition of Palestine is not against anyone, least of all Israel. Furthermore, this decision reflects our absolute rejection of Hamas, a terrorist organization who is against the two-state solution.
When the move was first announced, envoys from the 3 nations were summoned to the Israeli Foreign Ministry. They were reprimanded and, in front of the media, shown images of hostages taken during the Hamas-led October 7th terror attacks. The European leaders hoped other nations would also recognize a Palestinian state. In Denmark, lawmakers put it to a vote Tuesday, but the motion was rejected. More than 130 countries already recognize a Palestinian state. The UK, the US, and Canada do not, but that doesn't mean the plight of civilians goes unnoticed.
The scale of human suffering and tragedy we're seeing in Gaza must cease. Canada in no way supports the military operations by Israel in Rafah.
Israel has repeatedly stated it is fighting for the survival and security of its state. This is not a life, says this woman, interrupted by the sound of an explosion. The UN says an estimated 1 million people have fled Rafah. Amid more strikes and ground forces advancing near the city, people were on the move again, searching for safety. Goomansingh, Global News, London.
A new report from a federal security agency watchdog says there are serious gaps in the way some intelligence was shared in this country between 2018 and 2023. Now, it involves CSIS, the RCMP, and other federal security departments, and shared intelligence about foreign interference by China. As David Aiken reports, it appears CSIS and the information gatekeepers at the Prime Minister's office didn't see eye to eye.
When the spies at CSIS first spotted attempts in 2021 by the government of China to target and intimidate Conservative MP Michael Chong, CSIS put together a briefing of its findings and sent it to those who might be able to do something about it, including then Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. But a new report from the independent watchdog agency charged with oversight of CSIS says that CSIS does not track who actually reads their reports. And in fact, Mendicino would say 2 years later that he first learned about the Chong matter in media reports, not from CSIS. The watchdog agency, it's called the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency, or NSIRA, said this is an unacceptable state of affairs and that the failure by CSIS to document who reads what results in unacceptable gaps in accountability. And Sierra's review was sparked by reports Global News and the Globe and Mail did in 2022, tracing China's foreign interference efforts in Canada, reports based on CSIS sources. CSIS had summarized those efforts in a 2021 briefing for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But neither Trudeau nor his inner circle ever saw that CSIS briefing because the PM's National Security and Intelligence Advisor blocked it, calling it a summary of routine political activity.
If CSIS is investigating it, it has to be clandestine activities, not diplomacy. But the readers of the intelligence are thinking it's just diplomacy, and it's not impressing them enough to go to the Prime Minister. And that's discouraging.
And Sierra says that's a problem, that consumers of CSIS intelligence need better, quote, intelligence literacy.
The people that should be reacting and acting on the intelligence don't share the same view of the people collecting the intelligence and packaging it up, then I think we have a problem.
The government's response, well, it says it is already making many of the improvements Sarah recommended. The current public safety minister, Dominic LeBlanc, says these days, everybody's reading everything. Farah.
David Aiken in Ottawa, thank you. After months of negotiating, Ontario has hammered out a deal with the federal government to unlock hundreds of millions of dollars for affordable housing.
The agreement that we've been able to finalize today is the bilateral agreement under the National Housing Strategy, which transfers this year $357 million to Ontario in exchange for certain commitments to meeting an overall number of repairs to existing affordable housing, but importantly, adding new additional affordable housing stock as well.
The federal government had said it would bypass the provincial government and give money to the municipalities directly if it didn't meet federal housing targets and have an adequate action plan. There was a history-making moment in the Ontario legislature today. That's New Democrat Sol Mamakwa giving a 10-minute speech in his own language, Oji Cree. It's the first time a language other than English or French has been officially approved in the Ontario legislature. Mamakwa described how colonialism and residential schools contributed to the loss of Indigenous languages in Canada. The speech, he says, recognizes the importance of Indigenous languages in the halls of power. When Mary Simon became Canada's first Indigenous Governor-General in 2021, she was flooded with online hate and harassment. Today, she stopped by our Global News offices in downtown Toronto to talk to us about what that was like.
It does have an effect on you, even if you don't want it to. It does personally affect you, and that was something that I went through, and then my family was affected, and it has a toll on you, both in terms of your emotional well-being and your mental health.
Simon has started a social media campaign called We Deserve Better, with the goal of creating a safer online world. Many residents in southwestern Quebec are still in shock after a tornado touched down yesterday. It happened around 5:30 in Rigaud in the afternoon, about 70 kilometers west of Montreal. The twister formed during powerful spring storms that saw up to 80 millimeters of rain fall in some areas. Officials say 4 homes were damaged, but no injuries have been reported. In Papua New Guinea, there are fears of another devastating landslide. Estimates suggest between 670 and 2,000 people could be buried under meters of mud and rock that came down on Friday. Papua New Guinea lies just north of Australia and borders Indonesia. It's nearly as big as Manitoba, with a population of more than 11 million people. It's one of the poorest countries in Oceania. The terrain is remote and it's mountainous, and as Redmond Shannon reports, aid has been very slow to arrive.
Immense grief and immeasurable desperation, digging to find loved ones as hopes of rescues become tasks of recovery. We will not give up, says this former local politician. Only 6 bodies have been recovered so far. These people are digging despite the dangers. Authorities in Papua New Guinea say Friday's huge landslide that engulfed a village may not be over yet.
My team that were actually at the site yesterday, they said they could even feel the ground moving under them and the ground moving around them.
People in the area are being warned they need to get ready to leave. Alongside the threat of another landslide, drinking water is being contaminated as it flows down through what may be hundreds or even 2,000 bodies. No one is sure.
At the moment, we don't have a good basis for those estimates, and that's the trouble.
Tribal unrest has complicated the aid effort, as has a bridge collapse on the main route to the remote inland location.
We're providing emergency relief supplies, including shelter, hygiene kits and specific support for women and children.
The Canadian government says it's waiting to hear how it can best help.
Depending on the information that we get, we're on standby to provide any humanitarian aid that is necessary.
The UN says more than 7,000 people are affected. The injured, the homeless and the traumatised. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
It has been 1 year since Nova Scotia's destructive wildfires. Coming up, the lessons learned and the improvements residents want to see. One year ago, thousands of people in suburban Halifax were forced from their homes by a raging wildfire. Many people lost everything. Heidi Petracek on the lessons learned.
The memories are strong.
The fire was raging in my backyard. I immediately had to feel like I need to run for my life.
It was snowing ash and needles and debris. Embers were flying around everywhere. The smoke at times would block out the sun.
The flames traveled at breakneck speed as residents of the Upper Tantallon area of Halifax raced for safety. 16,000 people had to flee. The fire destroyed 151 homes.
So this is basically going to be inside here is where the foundation is going to go.
Today, Tricia Murray-Dion and Jenny Saunier refocus on rebuilding their homes, along with sharing improvements they'd like to see, like earlier emergency alerts.
To give us a heads up, let us know when we're in danger, to know that we don't have to rely on ourselves to keep ourselves safe.
And better evacuation routes.
Everyone was stuck. We couldn't get out of the subdivision. They ended up cutting the bolts on an ATV trail, and that's how we all evacuated.
99% of our fires here in Nova Scotia are human caused.
No one has been charged in the Upper Tantallon fire, but investigators found careless burning was the cause. Kara McCurdy's goal in her new job as Halifax's wildfire mitigation manager is preventing it from happening again.
We want them to be following the burn restrictions daily. And with Halifax Regional Municipality, you're only allowed to burn till midnight. And people often don't know that.
While she can't control the hot, dry weather that increases fire risk, she is assessing neighborhoods to help minimize destruction.
How close the homes are to the forest, how close they are to one another.
Perhaps the biggest lesson is that it can happen anywhere.
It could start at any point. That's, the really scary part.
And a reality with the 2024 wildfire season underway. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Hammonds Plains, Nova Scotia.
Major kickoff still ahead. The next chapter for Canadian women's soccer is officially unveiled. Welcome to a new era of women's soccer. Today, Project 8, an initiative with one major goal, getting a professional women's soccer league off the ground in Canada, was officially named the Northern Super League, turning a dream into reality.
That the growth of the women's professional sport market internationally is just getting started. And more than that, that Canada has a role to play in being a leader in women's sport.
Canadian soccer legend and Project 8 co-founder Diana Matheson says the league will kick off in April next year. With a 25-game regular season, it's launching with 6 Canadian teams: Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax. Bovine mystery, the case surrounding a massive Quebec cattle heist. Over the years, there have been some rather notable thefts in Quebec. Maple syrup, tons of corn, and even a tiger and 2 camels. The latest happened about 2 hours east of Montreal, and as Mike Armstrong explains, it's a heist that's about as hard to believe as it was to plan.
Donc
Les barrières ici étaient déjà fermées.
Arriving home last Thursday night, Jonathan Fortin didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. The thieves that had visited his farm had closed the gate.
Quand j'ai fait mon tour le matin,
He says it was when he was making his morning rounds that he noticed the gate was closed differently and the tire tracks.
donc on voit ici les traces du véhicule. Là.
Right away, Fortin headed out to his back fields. What he found was something he thought was impossible. All 75 of his cows were gone.
Ils ont fait le tour comme ça.
Fortin says the thieves herded the animals in the field with a vehicle. It wouldn't have been difficult. The cows would have followed the path they usually take to be fed. But once there, getting dozens and dozens of cows into a truck, or more likely 2 trucks, would have been more complicated.
C'est des gens qui étaient organisés, qui sont arrivés.
They're people who were organized, he says. They came in a group. Now, it is a massive loss, likely about $200,000, and they weren't insured. It didn't seem necessary.
Ça prend des gens qui connaissaient bien ça.
Michel Briand is with the Agricultural Union and says whoever took the cows knew what they were doing. The question is, what can they do with the cows now? Each has 2 earrings identifying where they're from. If they're removed, no abattoir or auction is going to take them.
L'identifiant est obligatoire. Et...
Briand says they're probably in another person's backfield, possibly in another province, while the thieves hope for the heat to die down.
Oui.
Now, police are in contact with Fortin. They're working on some tips, and he hopes he can get his cows back.
Merci beaucoup.
But the other part of what's upsetting is Fortin knows he was being watched, even followed. The thieves planned the heist for when he'd be away working at his second job and were gone before he got back. Neighbors did hear some strange noises, but not quite strange enough to look into it.
Donc c'est de repartir à zéro.
Fortin and his wife now find themselves starting over in a deep financial hole. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Cookshire, Eaton, Quebec.
And that's Global National for this Tuesday night. I'm Farah Nasser, and on behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is this egret going fishing in Toronto's High Park. Until we're together tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.